Welcome to my channel. This is one for Azazel. In the last video, I focused on Isaiah 52, 12, Isaiah 52:13 to Isaiah 53 on the suffering servant, and showed that the servant isn't the Messiah, but the servant is a nation of Israel who would be exalted during the Messianic age. And had a few objections to that. Some people think that I was saying that Jesus isn't the Messiah, or I was denying him. So what I'm trying to show is that Isaiah 53 is not a messianic prophecy. It was never considered as one until centuries later when some Christian writers made it one. After the fact, but it's never been understood that way in the past. When it was written by the Jews, they have a different understanding, and that's what I'm trying to show, what the original interpretation of it was before Christians reinterpreted it. And I think that's important. It's important to understand the scriptures on how they were understood by the people who wrote it, and also the basic interpretation and meaning of these things before you then go and apply it to other things. That's the whole point of the videos that I'm trying to make. Now, whether in your mind that discounts Jesus as the Messiah or you still think he is, that's up to you to decide. So now I'm going to look at Psalm 110 and Psalm 2. I think it was Psalm 2 which came up in the comments, one of the commenters on my last video. It's quite interesting because these, I believe both of these Psalms are considered messianic, and they've always been considered that way from when they were written. But just looking at these Psalms, when I looked at it the first time, and you see Psalm 110 here, the utterance of Jehovah. Now this is a New World Translation, that's why it uses the name Jehovah. But that's the Lord in all capitals, or tetragrammaton. So anyway, it says the utterance of Jehovah to my Lord. And bearing in mind that the superscription there above the psalm says of David. So straight away I thought to myself, and I've always thought, David is writing this psalm or this song. So who is David's Lord? Because David is saying that Jehovah, his God, said to his Lord. So who is David's Lord? Now, of course, Christians would say, well, David's Lord is Jesus, because Jesus existed, before David was born. If you read the Gospel of John, you'll get that Jesus was the Word, so he had a pre-human existence. So that it's pretty easy to say then that Jesus is David's Lord here. But is that the case? Is that how the original writer, or the Jews who compiled the Hebrew scriptures and wrote them, is that how they understood it? So that's what I wanted to find out. And then if you look at Psalm 2, you get the same thoughts, or the same problem. Well, it's not really a problem, but for example, this one is when the nations raise up against God's anointed one. But in verse 7, it says, let me refer to the decree of Jehovah. He has said to me, you are my son. I have become your father. And straight away, even reading that, to a Christian would say, oh yeah, you are my son. Well, that's clearly talking about Jesus. God is talking to his son. But how do the Jews see this scripture? And, of course, Christians see this as being fulfilled in Jesus, and some parts are even yet to be fulfilled, such as verse 9, where he will break the nations with an iron scepter. And, the kings will have to accept Christ's rulership. But that hasn't happened yet. So, because what happened to Jesus as the Messiah is that he came as king, but he got killed. So he has to come back. But is there another fulfillment of this? Well, that's what I wanted to find out. So I did a little bit of reading of a couple of articles. I think it was on the website Jews for Judaism. So I wanted to see how the Jews view these scriptures and whether they have, I knew they would have a different take on them, because I know that Jews don't accept Jesus as the Messiah. But so, if Jesus didn't fulfill it, well, who did? Has it been fulfilled? So just starting in Psalm 2, just have a quick read. It says, "Why have the nations been in tumult, and the national groups themselves kept muttering an empty thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and high officials themselves have massed together as one against Jehovah and against his anointed one, saying, 'Let us tear their bands apart and cast their cords away from us.' The very one sitting in the heavens will laugh. Jehovah himself will hold them in derision. At that time he will speak to them in his anger, and in his hot displeasure he will disturb them, saying, 'I, even I, have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain.' Let me refer to the decree of Jehovah. He has said to me, 'You are my son. Today, I have become your father. Ask of me that I may give nations as your inheritance and the ends of the earth as your own possession. You will break them with an iron scepter, as though a potter's vessel you will dash them to pieces. And now, O kings, exercise insight. Let yourselves be corrected, O judges of the earth. Serve Jehovah with fear and be joyful with trembling. Kiss the Son, or accept correction, that he may not become incensed, and you may not perish from the way, for his anger flares up easily. Happy are all those taking refuge in him." So, kiss the Son, that's there's a Aramaic word. So this is written in Hebrew originally, but there's a Hebrew word bar, but they take the Aramaic, they take it as if it's Aramaic, so then it translates as son. But bar in Hebrew means pure. So there's an alternative reading. If you just read it all in Hebrew, it just means accept correction. But the translators have chosen to read the Hebrew word bar as an Aramaic word so that they can translate it as son. And then that fits more with it being Jesus Christ. So that's just a little point that was brought up in that article, and I can see it in the footnotes in this Bible here as well. var or bars, Aramaic, that word is used, not ben. So ben is son in Hebrew, but the word is bar. And in Hebrew, it means receive instruction, but if you take the Aramaic, it means son, kiss the son. So that's another side point. But anyway, we have this psalm here. There's no superscription, but if you just rely on Acts 4:25, it's attributed to David by Peter. The Jewish scribes they attribute it to David as well. So there's agreement on that. So how could this have been fulfilled? Well, it could have been fulfilled in King David, according to the Jewish rabbis. That's how it was fulfilled. So if we go to 2 Samuel 5:17, which looks at the history of the Davidic kingdom, if you can call it history. 2 Samuel 5:17. Now it says, "And the Philistines got to hear that they had anointed David as king over Israel. At that all the Philistines came up to look for David. When David heard of it, then he went down to the place hard to approach. And the Philistines, for their part, came in and kept tramping about in the low plain of Rephaim. And David began to inquire of Jehovah, saying, 'Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand?' At this Jehovah said to David, 'Go up, for I shall without fail give the Philistines into your hands.'" So here we see that King David was installed as king, so he was Jehovah's anointed one. And so the nations, the Gentile nations, Philistines in this case, they were in tumult over this. They didn't like the fact that David had been anointed as king over Israel. So they planned to get rid of him, muttering an empty thing. They take their stand and amass together as one against Jehovah and against his anointed one, saying, "Let us tear their bands apart and cast their cords away from us." So this is a fulfillment here. It was fulfilled in King David, who wrote this psalm. So David was perhaps even writing about this occasion, writing this song about it. And Jehovah gave him a victory, gave him many victories, in fact, according to 2 Samuel. So Jehovah, in effect, held them in derision. He said, "I've installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain." So David was installed as king, and Jehovah supported his kingship. But how can it be that David is, Jehovah says to David, "You are my son"? Now, this seems to apply more to Jesus than it would to David. But before we go there, just have a look, because the Jews have a different take on this. This really applies to the Davidic line. And the next king to come along was Solomon. And the kingship under Solomon reached its greatest extent all the way from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. And this is when all the enemies of Israel were subdued, and Solomon had great dominion over that part, according to the scriptural account anyway. That's a traditional view. So let's see how Jehovah viewed Solomon. If we have a look at 2 Samuel 7. So this is Jehovah talking to David through the prophet Nathan. And David really wanted to build a house for Jehovah, but he had too much blood on his hands, so Jehovah held that back from him. But he said that his son would do that, build him a house, which Solomon did. He built the great temple for Jehovah. So this is what Jehovah said through I think it was through Nathan. "Jehovah has told you that a house is what Jehovah will make for you. So this is to David, when your days come to the full and you must lie down with your forefathers in death, then I shall certainly raise up your seed after you, which will come out of your inward parts, and I shall indeed firmly establish his kingdom. He is the one that will build a house for my name, and I shall certainly establish the throne of his kingdom firmly to time indefinite. Note verse 14. I myself shall become his father, and he himself will become my son. When he does wrong, I will also reprove him with the rod of men and with the strokes of the son of Adam. As for my loving kindness, it will not depart from him the way I removed it from Saul, whom I removed on account of you. And your house and your kingdom will certainly be steadfast to time indefinite before you. Your very throne will become one firmly established to time indefinite. According to all these words and according to all this vision was the way that Nathan spoke to David. Okay, so David's son Solomon, who would be the next one in the Davidic line of kings, his kingdom would be fully extended and established to time indefinite, and God says that he would become his father and he himself will become my son. And the way the Jewish rabbis understand this in light of Psalm 2 is that this applies to the Davidic line of kings in Solomon, in particular Solomon. But it also would apply to David as well, but it definitely applies to Solomon, David's son. This is what David in this psalm would be referring to as a decree of Jehovah. So this decree came via the prophet Nathan. He has said to me, you are my son, I have become your father. Ask of me that I may give nations as your inheritance, and the ends of the earth as your own possession. You will break them with an iron scepter, as though a potter's vessel you will dash them to pieces. And now, kings, exercise insight. Let yourselves be corrected, etc., etc. Serve Jehovah with fear. So the rulership of Solomon reached its greatest extent, became firmly established. All the enemies were subdued. God called Solomon his son. God was Solomon's father, showing that Jehovah was fully supporting the kingship and had a close relationship with the Davidic king. And this is a fulfillment of this psalm, but it's also a vision of the Messianic age, which the Jews are looking forward to, when a king in the line of David will rule over Israel and re-establish Israel, and there'll be harmony and peace on the earth between all the Israel and all the nations, and everyone will worship the Jewish God Jehovah. And that understanding, it doesn't require twisting or stretching of logic or a convoluted explanation. You don't have to write another book to explain this. It's all in the Old Testament. It's all been fulfilled already to an extent. And the interesting thing too is that when this powerful ruler, Solomon, came in, he wasn't killed. He finished what he started, unlike Jesus, who came along as the promised Messiah to Christians, but then he got killed and he hasn't returned yet to finish what he started. So there's a real break in Psalm 2, we got to the part where Acts 4:27, Peter in the prayer to Jehovah said that Pilate and the religious leaders had taken their stand against Jehovah's anointed one, against Jesus, right? So, and Jesus was put to death. So he was the king. But because he's been put to death, this part here hasn't happened yet, but this part was fulfilled under Solomon in a minor fulfillment, if you like. So it's already been fulfilled. Whether you believe Jesus is going to fulfill this in the future is up to you, but I think it's personally more of a stretch to say that than to say that David and Solomon fulfilled this. It just makes logical sense to me. Anyway, I'm sure you'll tell me what you think in the comments, and I look forward to reading them. So now we go to Psalm 110. So the problem I had here is, well, David is talking to, well, he said that Jehovah said to my Lord. So David's Lord. Who is David's Lord? I was puzzling over this. And then when I looked at the Jewish understanding, it all made sense. Now you see up here it says of David. It actually, preposition before David in the Hebrew, it actually means for or regarding David. So this psalm is about David himself. Now, David composed it, but it's about him himself. So the my Lord in this psalm is David. Now, as Christians, you might be thinking, no, it can't be. This Lord here, it's capital L. It's another divine being or, creature that Jehovah's talking to. But David actually composed this psalm, and it was to be sung by the Levites about their Lord. And David was their Lord or master because he was the anointed king. And that's how the Jews see this, and that makes a lot of sense. So we'll just have a look. I haven't got the scripture, but it even says, I think it might be in Chronicles, that David gave the psalms to the Levites, to Asaph, so that they could sing them. I'll have to find that later. I'll put it in the description of the video. So that fits what the Bible says, happened. So David wrote these psalms and the Levites sung them. So once I understood that, this makes perfect sense now, because the Levites are singing of them, their master or their Lord, saying the utterance of Jehovah to my Lord is, sit at my right hand until I place your enemies as a stool for your feet. The rod of your strength Jehovah will send out of Zion, saying, go subduing in the midst of your enemies, which is exactly what King David did. He fought a lot of battles and subdued the enemies. Your people will offer themselves willingly on the day of your military force. In the splendours of holiness from the womb of the dawn, you have your company of young men just like dewdrops. Jehovah has sworn, and he will feel no regret. You are a priest to the time indefinite, according to the manner of Melchizedek. Now, when I got to this verse, I thought, how can this apply to David? If this psalm is for or regarding David to be sung by the Levites, well, how can they say, the Levites, bearing in mind they're priests, they're from the priestly tribe, and they're singing about David, that you are a priest to time indefinite, according to the manner of Melchizedek. Well, for a start, Melchizedek wasn't from the tribe of Levi. He wasn't even an Israelite. But he was a king, priest of Salem in Abraham's day, according to Genesis. The name Melchizedek means king of righteousness. So this king of righteousness, or king of Salem, was also a priest because he brought bread and wine out for Abraham after he had won a battle and rescued his nephew Lot. So can David rightly then be called a priest according to the manner of Melchizedek? Well, it's interesting that I'm just having a look at my notes here. That even David's sons were called priests. So we'll just have a look at that in 2 Samuel 8 verse 18. I've never realised or took note of this point before. I'm using the New World Abomination as well. Forgive me for that. Okay, so 2 Samuel 8:18 says, "And Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. As for the sons of David, they became priests." And we have a look at the footnote, priests or chiefs of the court. So priests were, if you were a court functionary or a chief of the court, you were said to be a priest. So even David himself could be called a priest. And you didn't have to be from the tribe of Levi, because even Melchizedek, who it mentions in this psalm, well, he wasn't from the tribe of Levi either. So, I'll just find the psalm, Psalm 110. So in this sense, even David's sons could be called priests, but David was a priest in the special sense, according to the manner of Melchizedek, because his kingship, or his ministry, if you like, would be to time indefinite. So the Davidic line, or a king from the Davidic line, would always be ruling Israel. So in that sense, David has had sworn to him by Jehovah that he would be a priest to time indefinite, according to the manner of Melchizedek. And then the next verse says, "Jehovah himself at your right hand will certainly break kings to pieces on the day of his anger." So being at Jehovah's right hand is a position of favour and also divine protection. And David certainly had this. When you look at the account in 2 Samuel, he definitely had Jehovah's protection. So this psalm that David composed for the Levites to sing about him and about Jehovah, David himself fulfilled as well. And according to the Jewish understanding, it's no stretch of logic, or it fits in with their teachings of the scriptures that they use, that David could be even spoken of as a priest, even though he was from the tribe of Judah and not from the tribe of Levi, just as Melchizedek was, not from the tribe of Levi, not even an Israelite, but still spoken of as a priest, in fact a priest of the Most High. So these are some interesting things that I found about Psalm 2 and Psalm 110, showing that they've already been fulfilled in the Davidic line of kings, in particular David and Solomon. They also foreshadow a time in the future when a Davidic king will rule over Israel in the Messianic age and restore Israel, and Israel will be exalted by Jehovah, and all the nations will be at peace with Israel. So that's the meaning of these messianic prophecies in Psalm 2, Psalm 110. Now let me know what you think in the comments, and I've tried to keep this video short. There's a lot of detail in it, but I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something as well. Again, the point of the video is to just look at what the meaning of these scriptures is, first of all, and the correct interpretation of them. If there's some greater fulfillment that applies to Jesus or someone else, then that's fine, but you need to, before you do that, just look at what the actual meaning of it is first. I personally don't feel that this applies to Jesus. I don't think he fulfilled the role of Messiah because he got killed. And I doubt whether he's going to come back. In fact, I'm pretty sure he won't. No one's ever come back from the dead. If you believe what the New Testament says, then that's fine. I personally don't think it's a reliable guide because there's too many contradictions in it. But having said that, I think it's interesting. If you're going to read a passage of scripture, you need to consider it is a Jewish text after all, Psalms, so you need to consider it from their viewpoint first, I believe, which is something I've never done as a Jehovah's Witness or as a Christian. Always considered it from the Christian point of view, and now that I don't consider myself to be a Christian anymore, I wanted to consider it from the Jewish perspective because it is their scriptures after all. So that's what I've done. So I don't mean to offend anyone. I'm just looking at this purely just from the Jewish standpoint to see whether they believed it had been fulfilled and how that could possibly be. And I was very surprised at how simple the explanation is that was given on their website. So hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.